Greetings, one and all. I've made this show especially for the equinox because I've been looking a lot into pyramids again recently. I love my pyramids in Egypt. One of the most wonderful times I ever had in my life was when I went to Egypt, and I still have a fascination with the ancient Egyptian way of life and what all these pyramids and such like were. I've read many books on the subject. I follow Dr. Joseph Farrell a lot, though I don't think the pyramid was a weapon, though I still love his books and love his work. I don't know if it was perhaps an accumulator of energy and powered the world in some kind of ancient technological way. I still think it's an initiation center myself. And I still think it was made by ancients that are much older than the historians and academics say it was. I think they've been around for a lot longer than we're told that they were around. And I know recently there was a scientist, or he was an archaeologist, might have actually been an engineer, I can't remember, called Glenn Dash, who started linking the pyramid to the equinox. And he was looking at the Great Pyramid in Giza. And I've always felt that it was to do with these pyramids around the world, are to do with the sun. There's something solar about them. And of course, we know that the Egyptian pyramid is all built and designed in such a way that it fits to the measurements of this planet. It's all mathematically aligned with the equinoxes. So apparently it's just a little bit off from the cardinal points, but yet it's still, when the equinoxes come, the shadow of the sun, there is a line in the middle of one of the flat side, well, not flat, obviously it's like that, but right in the middle, that seems to show that aligns with the equinoxes when they come, when they arrive on the spring and the autumn. And from the Rudolf Steiner point of view, which is something I kind of go with anyway, and I think Gurdjieff thinks this as well, at some point our Earth is going to become a sun. Now, a long time way into the future. It's not happening overnight. But the sun energy has to enter into the earth. And from Rudolf Steiner point of view, it's the Christ when he was crucified, he went down into the earth for 3 days. And when he was resurrected in his ethereal body, his etheric body, he came back up from the earth, but he left in the center of the earth a sheaf of him, of the Christ, to help this planet at some point in the future become the sun. And I quite like this idea, and this is why we're supposed to be working with the sun and the solar and become solar beings ourselves to help the earth develop. And then I found this quote in this book by Rudolf Steiner, which is The Search for the New Isis, the Divine Sophia, because I've been trying to understand where is the divine feminine in Rudolf Steiner's writings. He talks a lot about the goddess, but sometimes, well, we'll come to that bit in a minute, because first I want to read this quote from him, from Steiner. And he says, so he's talking about Ahriman. In the ancient Egyptian times, he worked with Typhon, the ancient Egyptian god, or some call him Seth, who killed Osiris, the sun god. He cut him up into many pieces, and Isis went looking for all these pieces and to put them all back together, and then that's how we get Horus born. I recommend going and looking up the old ancient Egyptian stories about this. So he's cut Osiris up, scattered his parts around the world. Isis has collected all of them, but she could not find the phallus, I think is the correct, and she had one created, and it's a bit weird, isn't it? But anyway, from that she then got obviously had with Osiris, and was impregnated with Horus. So I'm just going to continue from Steiner's quotes. I've just said about Ahriman and Typhon being connected. Ahriman, the enemy, cuts the body into 14 parts. Isis buries these 14 parts in various places, so that from now on they belong to the earth. So the sun god's being put into the earth. Anyway, he continues. This can show us how profound was the connection between the heavenly and the earthly powers in the conception of Egyptian wisdom. Osiris is, on the one hand, the representative of the sun powers. After having passed through death, he is, in various places, simultaneously, the force which matures everything that grows out of the earth. And that's, of course, because she's buried him all around. Like Typhon scattered him about, she's gone and reburied him in a sacred way. So Osiris can continue this sun magical power that's going to happen to help the earth become a sun. The ancient Egyptian sage is quick to imagine how the powers which shine down to us from the sun enter the earth and become part of the earth, and how, as sun powers buried in the earth, they hand over once more to man what matures out of the earth. The Egyptian myth is founded upon the story of Osiris, how he was killed, how his spice Isis had to set out on her quest for him, how she brought him back to Egypt, and he then became active in another form from out of the earth. So Osiris is still working, doing his solar activity, but from inside the earth, kind of like what the Christ sheath that's meant to be in the center of the earth, that's also radiating up out to help this planet turn into a sun. One of the Egyptian pyramids depicts the whole event in a most significant manner. The Egyptians not only wrote down in their own particular writing what they knew as the solution to the great cosmic secrets, they also expressed it in the architectural constructions. They built one of these pyramids with such mathematical precision that its shadow disappeared in the spring equinox owing to the position of the sun. The shadow disappeared into the base of the pyramid and only reappeared in the autumn equinox. So it's quite interesting that the sun in the spring equinox goes down into the pyramid, along this equinox line and into the earth and stays down there. This sunlight is continuously pouring down into it and then reappears on the autumn equinox. The Egyptians tried to express in this pyramid that the forces which used to shine down from the sun are now buried in the earth and stimulate the forces of the earth, so that the earth may produce the fruit which mankind needs. And he goes on to continue discussing that in this book, in these lectures, which I recommend if you're interested in them. And to me, this seems more plausible of what these pyramids would have all been about. And, inside, maybe they were initiation centers to help the initiates of the mystery schools to continue to do the sun, solar power, magical workings that need to be done to help this planet develop, to help humanity develop as well. As we know, many people don't want to wake up or don't want to be part of this. Someone was saying to me, they live a different kind of life. They live a naive kind of consciousness. They think they're living awake and alive. So he was saying that I shouldn't keep saying they're asleep. They're just naive. I get what he's saying. I see that. Yes, they're just naive to these mysteries and the whole cosmic process of what's going on. Most people just live for today and their lives now and don't think of what the whole of the universe is all about and what all our roles are, not just ourselves, but the planets and the moons. They all are going to develop and become part of evolution. They get promoted up to the next stage. Like with the angels, they can become archangels, and archangels can become archai, and us humans can become angels if we do the right work and complete the tasks. But he goes on to talk about Isis and why she has disappeared, or why there's not, the divine goddess is not here with us. Let me just find that part. Because he goes on to say that the mystery of modern humanity, the Mary Isis, has been killed and she must be sought out, just as Osiris was sought out by Isis. But she must be sought in the wide space of heaven, with that force that Christ can awaken in us if we give ourselves to him in the right way. So by connecting with the Christ, we can help find our ways to the divine goddess. And I shall just go back a bit and explain. This is what he was saying about the death of Isis. Oh, my dear friends, the soul will attain to altogether new feelings if it is willing to experience the new Isis legend within modern humanity. Lucifer kills Isis and transfers her body into the cosmic spaces, which have become a mathematical abstraction, or the grave of Isis. Then comes the search for Isis, which is what we should be doing. We should be searching for the goddess. And her discovery through the impulse given by the inner force of spiritual knowledge, which places into the lifeless sky that which stars and planets reveal through an inner life, so that they appear as monuments of the spiritual powers that surge through space. We look in the right spirit towards the manger when we first let the powers that surge through space kindle our feeling, and then look at that being who came into the world through the child. And obviously Mary, as we know, is the mother goddess of Jesus, who would become the Christ. So he's asking us to understand what she was going through and how she's the divine mother, continuing the role that Isis had before. We know that we bear this being within us, but we must understand him. You know, we're going back to what Paul said about Christ. Paul wrote about him after his Damascus experience. From then on, not I, but Christ in me, because we're trying to awaken the Christ in us. And I know many people find that quite difficult to cope with the Christ idea, but this isn't from a religious institution point of view. And I think Gurdjieff was saying the same thing. We're looking at the esoteric Christ, the Christ consciousness, and how we can work with that, which will help us reconnect with the true feminine goddess. And it's startling that he says in this lecture that she was killed, Isis was killed by Lucifer. Those of you that read Steiner know that he doesn't go that deeply in. Well, he does, but we have to read between the lines of what all this means. He talks about how, let me read this bit. Right, oh, hold on, sorry. Lucifer does not cut Isis in pieces as Ahriman Typhon did with Osiris. On the contrary, Isis is spread out in her true shape in the beauty of the whole universe. Isis shines out of the cosmos in an aura of many shining colors. We must learn to understand Isis when we look out into the cosmos. We must learn to see this cosmos in an aura of shining colors. But just as the Ahriman Typhon cut Osiris into pieces, so Lucifer blurs and washes out the colors in all their clear distinctions, blends and merges into one single whole, the parts which are so beautifully distributed over the heavens, the limbs of the new Isis, which go to make the great firmament of the heavens. So it's like, you know, the dark forces are still trying to stop us understanding, stop us connecting with the light forces. They're doing everything they can to distract us from it, to blur it, as he's saying here, to darken it. But we can still reach this. He says, we must give form to this new legend. Actually, let me go to the paragraph before. When the mystery of Golgotha took place, the divine Sophia, the wisdom that sees through the world and enables man to comprehend the world, worked in a twofold way. In the revelation to the poor shepherds in the fields, and in the revelation to the wise men from the east. This was the twofold working of the divine Sophia, the heavenly wisdom. This wisdom, which was still to be found in its later form among the Gnostics, and which the early Christian fathers and teachers of the church learned from the Gnostics, and used to enable them to understand the mystery of Golgotha. This wisdom could not be continued into our times. It was overwhelmed and killed by Lucifer, just as Osiris was killed by Ahriman Typhon. We have not lost Osiris, the Christ. We have lost that which for us takes the place of Isis. Lucifer has killed it, but the Isis being killed by Lucifer was not sunk into the earth as Typhon sunk Osiris into the Nile. Lucifer carried the Isis being, the divine wisdom whom he had killed, out into the world's spaces. He sunk her into the world's ocean. When we look out into this ocean and see the stars moving only according to mathematical lines, then we see the grave of the world's spiritual essence. For the divine Sophia, the successor of Isis, is dead. And then I was thinking about this of, you know, Christ is down in the earth, and Osiris is as well in the middle of the earth. By Ahriman. We've got Lucifer putting Isis into the seas and into the sky above us, and we're in between. And we talk about how we are supposed to be becoming the Christ in the center. So we have Christ working up from below to reach us. And we've got Isis, Mary, coming down as well to help us, while Lucifer and Ahriman roundabout on the sides, I suppose, left and right. They're kind of here where we want the divine sources coming from either way. So they're there to help us if we can attune to them, which is really just, working with the Christ in you. But Steiner gives a little prayer for Isis, Sophia, and Mary. And I'm just going to read that because I think it's quite a lovely mantra, and I've been kind of working on this lately, and it's difficult to explain the difference it makes in one, but I'm beginning to understand the Sophia side of it all more deeply, but it's difficult to put into words because it just starts working in one. And this is the mantra. Isis Sophia, wisdom of God, Lucifer has slain her, and on the wings of the worldwide forces carried her hence into cosmic space. Christ will, working in man, shall rest from Lucifer, and on the boats of spirit knowledge call to new life in souls of man, Isis Sophia, wisdom of God. And for those of you that have been reading Gnostic texts, which I know a few of you have in the last few years, have been in conversation with a few people via email about all this and reading all these different Gnostic texts, you begin to realize where they're coming from about the divine Sophia or the divine Mary, the divine feminine, and how she can help us, obviously lead us to Christ at the same time, but help us with our divine side and help us to balance out our divine feminine. And Christ will be there, or Cyrus, or will be there to do our divine masculine. And I can see this in various other faiths and theologies as well, of the male and the female, the divine masculine, divine feminine, constantly trying to be trampled on by the dark forces. And so Ahriman is trying to stop us all connecting with the Christ and the divine feminine. And I found in another Steiner lecture, which I was at a reading group in Steiner House, and we was reading about, because Easter is coming up, the archangels and how they're related to the different seasons. And coming up to Easter, we should be working with Raphael in this time. He's, the archangel of healing. And, Christ needed healing, didn't he, whilst he was on that cross and suffering. But this was quite interesting in the lecture about Ahriman. I'm just going to read that. If the Ahrimanic beings could realize their hopes, the whole of humanity would gradually be dissolved into the earth. The earth would absorb them. Finally, there would arise out of the earth, and that is Ahriman's intention, a single great entity in which all human beings would be merged. They would be united with it. Sounds familiar? But the transition to this union with the earth would consist in this. Man in his whole organism would become more and more like the living limestone. He would blend the living limestone with his organism and become more and more calcified. In this way, he would transmute his bodily form into one that looked quite different, a sclerotic form, with something like bat's wings and a head. This form would then be able to merge gradually into the earthly element, so that the whole earth, according to the Ahrimanic idea, would become a living earth being. So not the living earth being that it should be in its development of becoming a sun in the future. Ahriman's trying to change it into something else. And isn't it interesting that we humans that don't follow the soul spiritual path, the sleepy ones, the naively awakened ones, or naively awake ones that just do whatever they're told and will join in with all this because they just, comply, follow orders, obey, think, and I'm sure Ahriman will put it out as a very enticing thing to do. We have all this transhumanism on the agenda at the moment. It could be that. You might try other little tricks to entice people to become part of this entity. They won't see anything bad in it because he'll gloss it over, like Lucifer's the great deceiver Ahriman is as well. They're able to trick everybody. So this is why we need to wake up and have eyes to hear and eyes to see and ears to hear, and make sure we don't get caught up in that. But I think that people that are watching my shows, you probably are on your spiritual soulful path, and you're keeping awake, and you're not going to fall for it. You just got to stay in your heart consciousness. So I wanted to do that for a little equinox show, because it's all about the sun. And this day, this equinox, is obviously equal day, equal night. So enjoy your equinox and embrace the sun. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to do a little heart. Love you all. And thank you for watching. And thank you to those that were doing the thanks buttons. And I love all your comments and hearing from you all. Thank you, and have a great equinox.